Welcome, folks. As you're coming into the room here, do us a favor and just write in the chat where you are joining us from today, which community you are joining us from today.
Awesome. Star from Portland, Steve from Lincolnville. It's all pouring in.
Ooh, East Grand region. Sarah, welcome. That's fantastic. We're going to give folks another 30 seconds to hop in, and then we'll get going. All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Japhet Els. I'm an outreach and advocacy director with AARP here in Maine. I see some familiar faces in our lobby here. Great to see you all, and some new faces as well. I'm going to introduce Sam and Clara here in a second, but I just wanted to give you a couple sort of background on the County Connectors idea. You are all very much guinea pigs on the ground floor. And I say that with the utmost respect and gratitude. We have launched this program rather quickly, with the idea being that we want to build a strong grassroots, community-based foundation for broadband development in Maine. And that's not something that's going to take a year or even 2 years. This is going to be a regular infrastructure challenge and development push for all Maine communities. And there's a ton of work to do. And sitting back and looking at the field of what was in front of us for what broadband is requiring, we realized that it can't just be done from the top down. It's going to have to be bottom up. And indeed, we are already seeing communities bootstrap their way to finding solutions that fit whatever their challenges that they may be facing. As Clara will point out, there's a huge amount of federal funding coming down the pike right now, a huge opportunity for us to finally catch up when it comes to broadband development. I will say that having had many conversations with town clerks and town managers, there are not always as much support for broadband as one may think. Especially when you start throwing in other priorities. So today we want to give you a snapshot of really what the County Connectors program is going to be. Again, you are the earliest of early birds, if we can put it that way. And so we also welcome your feedback and questions. I would urge you to throw some questions in the chat as Sam and Clara are talking through some of these pieces, and help us make this a stronger program. Because it is the ground floor and we only have up to go in terms of goals and impact that we can have in Maine communities all over the state. And as I can see, we've got a good spread geographically of folks here. So I'm going to turn it over to Clara McCool and let her take the reins here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Clara McCool. Nice to see you all today. I spent the last year working with the Maine Broadband Coalition and am continuing to do so full time. I'm with the Greater Portland Council of Governments, but also spend a lot of my time working with the Maine Broadband Coalition. I also have worked with 2 Maine towns, Harrison and Naples, on their broadband committees. And I'm going to pass it over to Sam to start the presentation and ask a couple of questions from you guys.
Absolutely. So I'll just fire it up here. I'm going to share my screen and you guys just shout out if anything seems like it's going haywire, but I think we should be all good. So we'll just present quickly here, but basically, as Clara said, and as Japhet mentioned, this is the County Connector training. We're so excited to have you all here. I've seen and met a lot of you at AARP meetings or advocacy meetings or different individual meetings. So just so excited to see all your awesome faces here again, and just great to have you on board. And thanks for showing up. We're so excited to talk a little bit about this. And we're gonna get started here, but before we sort of dive really into the technical side of things, we want to do a little bit of a quick intro. And some of you may be familiar with Slido. We did a little bit of a demonstration with it.
Uh-oh, we seem to have lost Sam.
Some internet issues.
At an AARP app. It's a little survey and join you by scanning this QR code. Oh no. Let me know if I make it back.
There, you're back, Sam.
You're back.
Yeah,
I'm
we just
so
got the
sorry.
last 30 seconds in about 4 seconds.
Oh, geez. The super robotic, ultra fast version.
Yeah.
We're just flying through here, everybody. But yeah, sorry, I got a message. My internet is a little unstable, but we're hoping to tackle these problems head on very, very soon. But I'll just share my screen again. But basically what I was trying to say is that we're going to do a little Slido intro. There's many ways to join Slido. You can join with scanning this QR code on your phone, or you can go to this link, which I will copy into the chat. And also you can go right to slido.com and enter this number. So let me just make sure that the poll is running here. Yep, it should be good to go. And you guys can all see this. I will just double check that the link is in the chat here. Okay. Copying that as we speak. All right, and come on in when you can. Let me know if you're having trouble joining at all. I'll give you all a couple minutes to join in there. No active poll. Oh yeah, okay, that's okay. We haven't started the first poll yet, so it will show that there's no active polls. But as soon as I click this play button, you'll get your first poll and you can start answering. But we'll just give everyone a second to join on in first.
And for folks that have a smartphone, not a dumb phone, you can open up your camera app and just scan that QR code. I'm not sure if everyone is aware of that little trick, but when you hold the camera up, it should recognize this strange block QR code and open up a browser window to slido.com, to this exact page online.
Absolutely. Okay, and you should be able to, keep joining in as we move through the poll. You can join in at any time. So if you're still working on it, no worries at all. Take your time, but come in just whenever you get a chance. So I'll open up the first poll. You should be able to slide over to the question or to the polls window. And basically we're looking for one word here. They should start popping up on the screen, and just tell me why broadband's important to you. Maybe it impacts your life in some way that's really important. We've got essential on the board. I love that. It's your livelihood. It's a big part of community. Absolutely love these answers. Remote work. Yes, crucial. I can see we've got experts all across the board here. We don't need to remind you guys how important broadband is, but you're absolutely right about all these. Connection to all. Couldn't agree more. It's been really fun actually recently, especially during the pandemic. I've reached out to some of my old high school friends and people I haven't talked to in a long time, and just being able to access that through through the digital world has been actually a really great way to connect. So that's fantastic. We're going to push on to the next poll here, unless people want to keep sharing. So poll number 2, we're looking to find out a little bit about your internet speed at home. No worries if you don't have a specific speed. We also have other options down here. Maybe it's slow, all caps. Maybe you got middle of the road speed, or maybe you are blazing at home. I wish I could say that, but even here in Portland, I'm sort of more at the middle of the road level of things. And you can actually pick 2 options too if you want to, like one in the the speed aspect of things, and one more of a text-based description. Okay, all right, we've got blazing. I don't know who's blazing out there, but that's awesome. Good for you. Congratulations. I'm excited to hear it. Amazing. 63% coming in at between 25 and 100 megabits per second. So, you know, the Maine state, Ohio, Sarah says, I'm going to reconnect with another session. I'll learn more about this effort later. Absolutely. There's a recording that will happen after this meeting. Feel free to check that out when you get a chance. But yep, between 25 megabits per second and 100 megabits per second is good. But, you know, even Maine is moving towards 100 symmetric or above. So we're looking to beat even that metric. And that's sort of the bottom line here as we move forward. That's what you need to get into the modern era. So I'll push on to the next poll here. I'm just curious, you know, in a short answer, what do you hope to learn during this training? What are some things you're curious about? Maybe it's something about County Connector itself, the movement itself, or maybe it's about, you know, Broadband 101 or some more technical aspects of things. Great. Good stuff on the board here. How to help my community get affordable broadband. I definitely think we're going to be covering that today. We're excited to answer some of these questions here. How to deal with a reluctant town and county government officials who are not interested in broadband. That is the bread and butter of County Connectors right there. You know, we are trying to energize people. We're trying to build, you know, community voice that helps legislators and town officials understand that this is a real necessity and it's something that their constituency is interested and excited about. How we can incorporate future plans with our current plans. Yes, we need to be thinking long-term investments here. It's a big part of the requirements for state and federal grants, and it's a big part of just a successful, you know, planning process and down the line. So these are fantastic questions. I'm not going to go through every one, but it seems like a lot of this is going to get covered. Clara has a fantastic presentation on the 101 of broadband coming up, and I think we're going to just dive into some of the nitty-gritty here, but not get too far into the weeds. So it's a perfect balance. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for participating in that. We love to hear your voices. You guys really are leaders. As Japhet said, you're sort of at the tip of the spear here. You're ahead of the curve. This is a brand new effort, but we're going to make a lot of difference, I think. And, you know, Susan Crawford today was mentioning how important these volunteer networks are and how she wants to really support and you know, give even more resources to groups like this and make sure that it's not sort of a patchwork, but a really strong community of motivated people. So we're excited to see that. Yes, thanks, Stephen. It's fantastic. I can't take all the credit for this tool. I saw it first from Japhet, who I know got it from AARP's sort of toolbox, but it's been grand. So okay, we'll stop that poll for now. But I appreciate you all taking the time to participate. We'll just slide back over to the presentation here. No pun intended there. Don't hold it against me. And okay, awesome. So this is the County Connector presentation. The way this is going to work is that I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the organizational side of things, the volunteer side of things, the grassroots sort of aspects of what it means to be a County Connector. And then Clara is going to talk about the 101s of broadband, give you guys that foundational knowledge you need to go have a productive conversation at the town level. And we'll get rolling right now. Won't hesitate anymore. So the first question we're going to ask is, who is a County Connector? You know, what kind of an individual in your town are you going to be? And let me know if anything's blocking any of the graphics. I have some windows open, but I can't tell exactly when they are. Okay, Japhet says they're great. We're going to push on that. Who is a County Connector? County Connector is someone that builds networks in their town, someone that understands collaboration, and someone that believes in internet for all. And we'll just take those one at a time here. You know, building networks is really all about playing, and we're talking about community networks here. This is really what County Connectors are all about. We're building community networks of people that work together in order to make networks of internet services across the state of Maine. It's sort of we're laying the social foundation, and the technical foundation is the next step. But we're looking to take advantage of the natural characteristics of broadband. broadband, as we know, is something that touches all walks of life and impacts all types of people from all across the state and the country. It's important for education. And you guys, of course, know all these impacts. If you're here today, you're excited about why broadband is important, but it impacts, education, it impacts employment, it impacts telehealth, it impacts isolation and connectivity. And it really is just a driving force of the future of our state and the nation at large. We're also looking for people that understand the value of collaboration. This is key when talking about broadband because it benefits from an economy of scale. It benefits from larger projects. So the more we can connect regional players, bring people from across towns, municipalities, and counties, the better off we're going to be. So, but we also want to recognize here that collaboration has its own challenges, and each town's going to have its own nuances, which we'll dive into some of those pathways with Clara. But building this sort of patchwork of systems that all combine together to create a regional approach is going to be the very sort of essential foundation of what it means to be a county connector. And finally, believing in internet for all. Karem brought up, great points about inclusion and diversity in our efforts to roll out broadband across the state. And we're going to make sure that that's a core tenet of what we're looking to do. We're not going to let rural communities be left behind. We're not going to let people of color be left behind, or communities that are on the lower income end of things. We're going to make sure that everyone has the access to broadband that we need. And this is a big part of what county connectors bring to the table. So that sort of sums up who a county connector is: someone that builds networks of people. This includes, town officials and development council leaders, as well as someone who understands the power and challenges of collaboration and believes in internet for all. And we're going to move on to what will a county connector do? So what are the essential things that a county connector looks to do? And there's a lot of bullet points here. You don't have to hit all of them as you move around your county, but even if we can just get a couple of these processes rolling, we're going to be off to a really good start. You're going to amplify the benefits of broadband that we talked a little bit about in the last slide. You're going to support local efforts and leaders. You're going to organize broadband events. You're going to lead grassroots efforts. You're going to collaborate with other county connectors, and you're going to gather stories. And just to give an example of each one of those quickly, we want to think about, when we're amplifying the benefits of broadband, we want to think about people, organizations in our town that benefit from broadband. It might be libraries, it might be school systems, it might be local businesses, it might be health service providers or nursing facilities, things like that. Those are all places whose voices we're looking to incorporate into the conversation because they bring a tangible benefit to the table. We're going to look to support local efforts and leaders. So this is really important because we want to provide a united front. In some parts of Maine, there's already, groups working hard to bring internet onto the table and bring it to the region. And we want to make sure that we're working hand in hand with those people. We're going to offer our support to, people like Mia Purcell, Mike Wilson, Karem Durdag, make sure that we are creating a unified message and that we're assisting them in any way possible. We're also going to organize new broadband events. And those broadband events might be, regional dialogues like MBC has conducted in some locations. And they also might be, and regional dialogues are sort of a conversation about what are the specific needs of this area, assessing the actual infrastructure and feasibility aspects of a given project, but it's also about educating people on the importance of broadband. And we're also going to look to energizing events. So, energizing events might be new free hotspots that we're setting up at a local library, or, systems for increasing the ease with which people receive their prescriptions by making sure we're taking advantage of online tools that work with local pharmacies and doctors' offices. And those are just really great events because they generate energy and get people excited about the tangible impacts of broadband. And moving quickly here, because I want to keep an eye on time, we're going to lead grassroots efforts like calling up our neighbors. We're going to use a tool called Hub Dialer, which I know some of you have already done a training on, which is just so fantastic. Thank you for showing up to those. And we're also going to maybe run community surveys. This chart over here on my right is from a Waldo County survey. Maybe some of you are aware of this survey that happened, but they were measuring internet interruptions. And just as I experienced today with this Zoom call, they were reading that 55% of Waldo County members were experiencing internet interruptions once a day. And so these surveys really provide great information and sort of tangible issues that need to be fixed and that we can bring to the negotiating table. And finally, collaborating with other county connectors. We're going to talk about the MBC forums, which Clara is going to give a great presentation about how you can sign up for that. And you can easily talk to other county connector members and collaborate on your efforts. And really the last point, and this is something that's so important, is gathering stories. I think stories are one way that people really relate and connect to an issue that can sometimes feel obscure. When you have a real tangible story about someone's experience with being unable to access their educational materials from their teacher at school because their internet just wasn't up to par, that kind of thing that we can latch onto and help us get a more concrete understanding is going to really generate a lot of movement, a lot of energy. It's going to help town officials really understand the gravity of the issue. So I can't stress enough, gathering stories is a fantastic way you can support the County Connector effort. And we're going to talk a little bit about the final goals that can be summed up in 3 C's. We're going to create local relationships. We're going to collaborate across regions, and we're going to construct a broadband plan. Create, collaborate, construct. Those are the 3 C's of being a county connector. You gotta please forgive me about the alliteration here. I know the C's can be a lot, but it is important that we sort of hammer these home. We're trying to create relationships between the town officials, the county officials, and their constituencies that are responsible for telling them what needs to get done in their area. We're going to collaborate across regions. We're going to really try and build that regional cooperation that hasn't been present in Maine because we struggle with this individualism, this local town mindset, and it's really a little bit less effective for broadband efforts. And as the last leg, we're going to construct an effective and efficient broadband plan that meets the needs of our region. And really quickly, we're going to talk about next steps as a county connector that you can take. First of all, share this recording that will be posted on the Maine Broadband Coalition website. You can share this with anyone you think might be interested in broadband or people who you want to introduce to the importance or any sort of aspect of broadband. You can use it as a reference if you ever need to look back and find out more information. The next training that we would love to see you guys at, but there will be some repeat information. We'll throw a few new tidbits in there as well. That's going to happen December 9th at 9 a.m. Feel free to show up. We'd love to see you there. But more importantly, we'd love to see you all take part in the Island Institute's Let's Talk Broadband Talk. And I'll send out an email with all this information. Don't worry, you don't need to take it down right here, but I'll make sure you have it in your hands. This is the Island Institute Let's Talk Broadband Talks. It happens every Friday. They've been doing it for a while, but it's going to restart up in December 3rd at 11 a.m. And those are a place where you can meet other people who are motivated about internet and broadband across Maine, and also sort of ask questions and voice your concerns. And finally, we're looking at the concrete things that you guys can do. What is it, after you leave this meeting that you want to put on your plate and then maybe, translate into real positive actions as a county connector? First and foremost, maybe you can get towns to sign on to the guiding values document. And on the MBC website, there will be a sign-on page where you can encourage towns to go and sign up and agree to the guiding values that the Maine Broadband Coalition has put forth as essential to creating, equitable, fair, and essential broadband access. And these are just fantastic values. We can maybe show a diagram of them at the end of the presentation if that's helpful. That's going to be our first movement, is getting towns signed onto this document. You can join the MBC forum, which, as I said, Clara is going to give a great little demonstration of. It's a fantastic tool for communicating with others and really helpful. And you can connect with existing broadband leaders in your county. We're going to provide you guys with a sample email. You can feel free to change this however you want, but we're going to give you a name of a leader in your region, and we're going to give you a sample email, and you can take that email and send it off to your leader and just tell them, I'm a county connector in your area. Let me know if there's anything I can do to assist you. And we're looking forward to basically getting this movement on its feet. So those are the essential next steps. Happy to answer some questions about those now. I know we have some in the chat. And if anyone else has a specific question, feel free to raise your hand. We'll just do a quick question and answer here, and we can follow up at the end after Clara's presentation as well. So if you've got anything, either raise your hand or unmute. Let me know, if you've got any thoughts. In the meantime, we'll take a look at the chat here. Japheth, thanks for taking some of those questions in the chat. Okay. Does anyone have any questions, or are we good to move on to Clara's 101? Oh, Star, I see you've raised your hand. Feel free to jump in here.
Do you have communities that have already signed on to the guiding values document? Is that well known?
This is a great question. I think, and Clara, you might be better poised to answer this question, but my understanding is that for past events, there's been a similar kind of sign on. So towns are familiar with the idea, but we're looking to get even more towns signed on and more towns familiar with the broadband effort, and also update some of those previous expectations to include the new guiding values. Clara, did you want to touch on any of that?
Yeah, no. So in the past, we've had sort of people sign up to support bond issues, but this is sort of our first go at sort of getting towns to agree that broadband is a priority and agree to these guiding values. So this is sort of a new thing, and we have not had communities yet sign on to this. So you guys will be leading the charge, which is pretty exciting.
Exactly. And as Japheth mentioned in the chat, Japheth, you go ahead and talk about it.
Well, I just want to add, I just dropped this in the chat, but for those who can't see it, it's a really great, the guiding values statement is just a great way to sort of put broadband on your town's radar. So it may already be, right? If you talk to your town manager, your town clerk, or your select board members, and they say, oh yeah, this sounds great, like count us in, it could be really easy. Other towns might be saying, broadband isn't really a priority for us. I'm not sure if we agree. And that sort of starts the conversation about why, and maybe perhaps why broadband should be a priority. So it opens up that conversation if it needs to be, but more importantly, it also allows us and allows you all to take the temperature of your town leadership for where broadband is. So it allows us to kind of get a sense of where certain communities are falling when it comes to broadband as a priority.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll get a little bit of a temperature gauge of the state as a whole once we have this, sign up document live on the website. There's going to be a whole, page that you can visit there and see all the towns that have signed up. And we can understand a bit more about what are the target regions that need more attention in Maine. George, I see you've got your hand up. I'd love to hear your question. Go right ahead.
Well, some of it's been answered, but first steps are usually the hardest because they're the steepest. And you covered some of it. Where do we get copies of this guiding values document that then we can lug around? And secondly, probably it's always more impressive if you walk into your town manager's office or to a select person meeting with 2 or 3 people, as opposed to one lone crow wandering in from God knows where. So how does that get built, or has not gone into that or whatever? And I guess my other concern is on the being able to impart information on to people who know less than we do, which is really little, about this whole thing. And I guess I'm concerned with what's in the document before I see it, because I think there are kind of a whole bunch of different levels, and kind of you have to know your audience when you're talking to them. And if you're trying to get them to do something and be interested, you kind of have to have done some homework. So those are my comments. Thank you.
I think no, those are fantastic comments, George. And I'll try and take them one at a time. Let me know if I miss anything. First of all, we will make sure you have, the guiding values in your hand before you are trying to send that out. You get a chance to look it over. You can talk to me about anything that you have questions or concerns about. More than happy to do that. As far as being able to visibly see the document and how we're getting people to sign up, we can hand out, paper copies of it, but the primary way will be a portal on the MBC website, and you direct people to that portal and they can just sign up right there, and all the information sort of updates automatically and plugs right into the website page where you can see what towns have signed on to the guiding principles or guiding values. And also you mentioned, getting more than one person attending the meeting, the town meeting. I think that's a great question. This is why we want to have 4 county connectors from each region. Each county will have 4 county connectors. It's a total of 16, and that's at the very least. We're hoping to expand, further than that as well. And that is an ongoing effort, and we will make sure that you are connected to the other connectors in your region. We'll make sure you guys have means of communication, which is going to get back to that MBC forum we talked about before. It's going to be a great way for you to talk to and collaborate with the other county connectors nearby so that you guys can coordinate your efforts and be there together. Is there anything else? Oh, and as far as the education aspect of things, Clara is going to dive into some 101 that's going to give you a great foundation here. And other than that, I'm more than happy to sit down and have a conversation with you about anything you want to have sort of at your fingertips for when you're trying to share information about how important broadband is.
Am I up again?
Yeah, we do.
Do I get 30 seconds? I don't want to take over this because you've got something, but it seems to me that one of the groups that we probably ought to make an effort to contact are like the local legislators. Next year is an election year. Mm-hmm. To me, this looked like being in favor of this stuff kind of is good for those who are running for re-election kind of thing, and they might be more attuned. And it's always helpful, like I said, to have someone come with you who at least is leaning in the right direction. Now I'll shut up. Thank you.
That was a great point. We're definitely looking into, having those dialogues and conversations with town officials and local legislature, as well as at the state level. And so couldn't agree more. The communication and relationship building at that level is critical to the effort. And you're spot on there, George. We got to have those people on board if we want to make this thing happen. So with that, I'm going to let Clara take the wheel here. She's got just a wealth of understanding on the technical side of things, and I can't wait for her to tell you guys a bit more about it.
Thank you so much, Sam. Okay, so now we're gonna delve a little bit into the technical side, but before we do that, I am going to walk you guys through how to use the Maine Broadband Coalition Forum. So this is essentially a feature on our website that we launched within the past year as a way to provide a space where people across the state can connect, share news, share information, best practices about their broadband planning. Because I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but a lot of information about broadband tends to live in different places, be hard to get, find the right people to talk to. So we created this as a way for people to have one place where they can go to find resources, ask questions, and connect with people in other towns or other regions. So I'm going to share my screen really quick and walk you guys through how to sign up on our website. And then I'll show you guys the forums that we have that exist, so you guys can start interacting with those.
And while she's doing that, I'll just say, because Clara's being very kind here, and what she's helped create here on this forum is unique to Maine. We don't really have any place for a lot of these communities and county connectors like yourselves to communicate and share what's working and what's not, to ask questions about certain broadband nitty gritty. And so this forum was really meant to be a tool to bring folks together who are working on the broadband issue in their own communities and to share sort of best practices, maybe have a little rant about what's not happening in their communities. But the bottom line is, this is our sort of social hub for expanding broadband from a grassroots perspective. So I hope folks will follow along and get plugged into the forum.
Thank you so much, Japheth. Okay, so if you visit the Maine Broadband Coalition website, you'll be brought to this, which is the homepage. And when you look up here, there's a little section on the top that says forum. And if you're to go to instructions and click here, there's an in-depth guide on how to access the forum, how to sign up, how to make posts. So I'm going to walk you through it right now, but this is available on the website to anyone, just in case you have more questions. And then as always, feel free to reach out to Sam or I or Japheth with questions that you have, and we'll share our contact information. So to start, you want to click log in, and then you want to fill out these fields. So just your name, email, password. Since I already have an account, it's auto-filling. Company, organization, what community you're coming from. And then down here, this is an important section for you guys. So you can select any of these options, but you're going to want to click I'm a county connector. And this way, your contact within our system as a member, you'll be tagged as a county connector, so that we can give you a badge, and so that other members will know how to identify you as a county connector. They'll be able to reach out to you, to communicate with you, and that'll sort of be established on your member profile once you create an account. So since I already have an account, I'm going to go down and click log in just to show you guys what the forum itself looks like. So now I'm logged in. As you can see up here, this is my profile. I can click on it and it'll bring me to a page where I can customize, write a little bio about yourself. So this is sort of my bio, and it'll show you which comments you've made, which posts you've made. And all of this, again, is described in more depth in the directions and the user guide that we'll provide you all with. So if we want to look at the forum, you go here, see the drop down, click forum. Wait for it to load. All right, so here we are. We have a lot of forums already set up. So we have one that's sort of a general discussions. We have more specific ones. This one covers telehealth. And we have also created a forum for every county in Maine. So this is a place that county connectors for each county. This is a place where you can go in and communicate with people who, different broadband leaders, different towns that have existing efforts. So for example, if I were to click on Penobscot County, for example, as you can see, Andrew has posted, Andrew Butcher, who is, he was the lead of the Maine Broadband Coalition. He posted a speed test report for people to access. Tracy Shekel with Otelco, which is an internet service provider in Maine, posted some news about broadband expansion in Penobscot County. Karem Durdag, who we heard from in the earlier session today, is talking about GWI plans for Penobscot County. So this is a really great way to plug into existing efforts. And then also you can create your own post by clicking here. You can either start a discussion or ask a question, and sort of share something about yourself, maybe introduce yourself to the county as their county connector, maybe ask a question. So this is a really great way to interact and collaborate and communicate online, and create a central spot for your county planning and coordination. So really quickly, I'm just going to show you one other thing on the forum site before we move to questions. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, I have created a county connectors forum. So this is for you guys to create a new post. So nothing has been posted yet. I believe after this session, Sam will be posting some follow-up materials for all of you. But feel free to go on here, introduce yourselves, share a little information about where you're coming from, what experience you've had with broadband so far. And this is a great way to connect with the other county connectors across the state to figure out what they're doing, learn from them, decide on best practices. And also it's a way for you to interact with Sam, Japheth, and I if you have any questions or want to start a discussion with one of us. So that is the County Connector Forum feature. And I just want to open it up before I move on to the technical aspect of broadband. Just want to open that up for any questions that you guys have. And again, I will be sharing an in-depth user guide with you all. I think that is, We have one
I have a
question.
question from Jessica.
Jessica.
Yeah, hi. So I joined this through AARP, and philosophically I joined it. It appealed to me. Well, philosophically, it just jives with my values, but technically I listened yesterday and this morning, and so much was over my head. So much was, I had no idea, it is complicated. It was technical. It was, even GWI, I have no idea what GWI is. So how are we gonna, first, how much of that technical stuff do I, as one of these volunteers, have to know, or I could really leave this to others, or, yeah, so that's mine.
I'll jump in and respond, and then Clara and Sam can answer as well if they'd like. Don't sweat all the details. This is an incredibly complex issue. I think that you can dive very deep into the weeds on broadband. It's like if anyone's ever really wanted to understand the nitty-gritty of utilities, it's very similar. A lot of the lines are running on the same poles. So it gets very technical very fast. Our goal is not to inundate you with information. Our goal is to give you certain information that you can pick through and say, this is of value. I understand this, or I want to know more about that. And I think Clara and Sam can help connect those dots for you, but you can also have some answers on the forum. So the forum is really meant to be sort of a resource as well. So you can sort of see how people are talking about this stuff. And also, be patient with yourself, Jessica. This is a heavy amount of information that's very technical. You're not going to understand it in a day or even a week. And the folks who are working in this particular sector on this issue have been doing so for years. And the more meetings I've had, you still find people who might be very good at one particular thing or know a lot about one particular part of broadband, but they will admit that they don't know the other pieces. So the goal here is not to make you into overnight experts. The goal is to give you enough to sort of move forward in your community, because the bottom line is many of the folks in town and community leadership positions know less than you do. And if you're lucky enough to have a town or community leader who knows way more than you on broadband or any issue, fantastic. Just be aware of that when you engage them. But know that just by being on this summit conversation, being a part of the summit, you're already ahead of most of our town leaders and select board members who are all coming to broadband like many of us are, sort of haphazardly forced through the pandemic and wanting to understand more, but knowing it's very technical. So don't sweat the small stuff and be patient with yourself.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll also say, just to add to that, Jessica, so when I started last year, I really came into this fully new, didn't know anything about broadband or the technical aspect of it. Something that I learned that was really useful is there's not one person who's going to know everything, but something that is really key is sort of figuring out who the right people are to ask those questions to. So I still get questions sometimes that I don't know the answer to, but I think something that's been really important is sort of knowing, okay, maybe this person would have the answer to that question, and being able to connect whoever asked it to that person. I think that's something that county connectors will be able to do. And once you get sort of engaged with people within your county who are working on this, we'll never have the answer to every question, but being able to find the person who might have that answer, or post to the forum the question and through that find someone who might have the answer. So definitely don't, like Jeff had said, don't feel the need to know every answer. And it does feel a little overwhelming at first, but it can quickly become more manageable as you talk to the right people and know those key players. So that's the point I would make.
I think those are both excellent points. I think I completely agree with Japhet and Clara, and I just want to jump in because it's such an important question you raised, Jessica. But I just want to stress too that as I've talked to more and more of the experts in the field, a lot of what they talk about is that the thing that we need most we have people that have the expertise to, solve the really technical issues like developing a financial plan or developing an infrastructure, implementation plan. What we don't have necessarily are the people who can organize, legislatures and towns and counties to be excited about this and move it through the legislative process and help us gather that social energy. And so that's where you guys are coming in. Don't feel like you need to be the technical experts on the ground. Just understand that you are playing an equally important role getting the message out and being someone who helps gather community members in a level-headed way that makes people excited to be a part of something bigger and make a real investment for the future. And that's what I'll just add.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica, for asking that question. I think that was a really important thing to bring up. Does anyone else have questions? Let me look at the chat. I see some.
It's a question from Deb there. It's a good one, which is what sorts of information will be available for community leaders? Clara, do you want to just briefly hit on sort of what you guys have given towns and communities in the past that maybe are considered resources for how they can approach broadband in their community?
Yeah, so I'll stop sharing for a minute. So there are a few resources that I believe Sam is going to send you guys after this, and that will also be posted to the forum. But there are a few key trainings that are really important. Maine West, which is in Oxford County, put on a broadband boot camp series. So this was 8 sessions. George seemed to know what I'm referencing, but
some of them.
yeah, so it's 8 sessions, and they go over funding, community engagement, different ownership models. And it's a really great sort of introduction to broadband planning and sort of the state of broadband in Maine and what communities are doing. So when I sort of onboard someone into the broadband world, that's sort of the first place that I point them, because I think it is a really useful way to sort of get a very well-rounded view of what's going on in the state. So that's sort of the big resource I would give. And I also, in my presentation, I'm going to touch on a lot of different aspects of broadband in Maine, organizations to pay attention to. And these slides, again, will be available to you all. This session will be recorded. And I think Sam has some more resources and materials that he'll be sending along that I've helped contribute to. And then again, as you go through these resources, as you go through the Maine Broadband Bootcamp, questions inevitably will come up, and you can feel free to directly push those towards Japhet, Sam, and I. But I think also some of the questions that you may have will be questions that other county connectors will also have. So any opportunity you have to post those on the forum for people to respond to and other people to learn from, I think is really great. Hopefully that answers the question. All right, do we have any other questions before I start talking a little bit about the technical aspect?
So so that boot camp link is on the Maine Broadband Coalition site. So I could watch that boot camp link.
Yep. Yeah, and we can also send you directly a link to, and I'll actually put it, it is available, and I can find the link and put it in the chat, but with follow-up materials for this, I will include a link to the Maine West website, which has recordings for every session, and then some sessions, it comes with the PowerPoint slides. But it was 8 different sessions. A lot of communities were involved, so there are a lot of communities within Cumberland and Oxford County specifically, if any of you are working in those areas that joined this effort, were a part of the broadband boot camp. From that, they formed committees. A lot of them created a website, put out community-wide surveys to identify needs, met with service providers in their area. So a lot of those towns were sort of following those steps, which you can learn more about by watching the boot camp. So that will be a really good reference tool for you all. Does anyone have any more questions on that? All right. I think it is time to jump into Broadband 101. So I'm going to share my screen with you all.
All right, just a quick heads up. Emily just let me know we have this room until 11. So if I know that's pressing you a little bit for time because your presentation is pretty comprehensive, but if you can do it in 15 minutes, that will be incredible. And then we'll have this recording. And if other people want to jump on to other meetings, that's great. We'll have this recorded. You can access it at any time, but just wanted to give a little heads up on what we're working with timing.
Yes, sounds good. And yeah, I'll try to move through this pretty quickly. But again, these slides will be available to you, and any questions you guys have that we don't get to by the end of this, we will respond to you directly via email or on the website. So definitely don't feel like this is the end. It's just the beginning. We are there as resources, and feel free to always reach out with questions. I'd be happy to answer. All right, so we're just going to start off really quick with this slide. So why is broadband a priority? Clearly, you all know that it is because you're taking part in this program and this effort, and you've shown up today. But I just wanted to touch upon the ways in which broadband influences many aspects of our life, and especially has been highlighted in the past year with the pandemic. So as far as employment and economic opportunity, researching and applying to jobs happens largely online. Working remotely, something that we're sort of all doing right now by taking part in this presentation, is something that we're all having to do remotely with broadband access. Education and learning. There's something called the homework gap. So this is the idea that students without internet access fall behind on homework assignments, because a lot of homework nowadays, when you get home, you need to use internet access to either do research, to upload assignments. So this is something that's important to touch upon, because within the past year or so, we've had to deal with remote learning, but the homework gap is something that existed before the pandemic even began. And even as students start to go back to school, they're still going to be asked to complete homework assignments after they're already in their homes where they might not have access to internet. Healthcare is another aspect. This is really important for Maine specifically. We have the oldest demographic in the state, or in the country. So it's really important that people are able to age in place, have access to their healthcare providers from where they live. Telehealth is a big issue just because Maine is so rural. So a lot of times people are not able to have the transportation to get to their hospital because it's not near their home, or they don't have the time to drive there. So being able to have a telehealth appointment and able to access those healthcare services is really important. And then lastly, social ties and civic engagement. Registering to vote largely happens online. Attending public meetings. The State House has had all of their meetings become virtual, and they're trying to work to have a hybrid system so that people who were able to tune in and participate will still be able to, even after people start going in person. Maine clerks actually cited a significant increase in public participation in rural towns in Maine as far as civic engagement with the pandemic, when town meetings began to be online. So this is something that's really exciting for civic engagement, social ties, being able to connect with one another when we can't be in person. These are all really important aspects, and will come into your work in the sense that when you're gathering stories from community members and speaking with select boards or town committees, these are important things to touch upon, to say, this is why broadband needs to be a priority for your community, and this is how it affects you and your residents going forward. So now I'm going to move on to a bit of broadband basics. So this is some technical information on sort of what broadband is. So high-speed broadband is a standard. So high-speed broadband is considered internet speeds that are greater than 25 megabits per second download speed and 3 megabits per second upload speed. So this is the current federal standard for broadband. Upload is when you need to attach something to an email, upload something on a website, that would be your upload speed, whereas download is you're taking something off of the internet, downloading it onto your device. So that's sort of what those two speeds mean. Something that is important to keep in mind for Maine specifically, this is an evolving definition. Connect Maine, the state agency that I'll talk a little bit more about later, has already updated their standard. They define high-speed broadband at 100, so symmetrical speed. That's a word you probably heard earlier today, but symmetrical basically means same download speed, same upload speed. So it'd be 100 megabits per second download, 100 megabits per second upload. And now they define unserved, instead of being areas below 25.3, it's all areas below 50.10. So the state is now defining a lot more area in Maine as unserved than even the federal government. And as time goes on, we are hoping that the federal government will get on board with this definition and also begin lifting their definement of unserved areas. And then really quickly, just for some context, why is it so hard to get universal broadband in Maine? A big issue is that broadband is a place-based infrastructure, and we are in a very rural area. And in the past, it has worked such that internet service providers will not expand to an area if they don't see a business case there for them. So if you have a town that is densely populated and you cable out, pay the money to connect from the internet to that town, you have a lot of potential subscribers in that area for a low price. However, if you have a house that is very far away from the center of town and you have to provide infrastructure to get out to that house, you are paying, this internet service provider is paying to build that infrastructure out to that one house, but only getting the subscription fee from that one customer. So that's sort of some context for why in the past it's been difficult to get internet service providers to build out to more rural areas. And that's why in rural Maine, it's hard to get internet access. So that's just a little context. Now we're going to talk a little bit about different types of infrastructure. So I'm going to go over pretty briefly all the types that are shown in this image, but again, you will have access to these slides. Each provides a little description, which is really useful. So we'll start with mobile broadband. So this is sort of what you have on your phone. This allows you to have internet from one location to another. And is not a fixed internet speed. So this is like 3G, 4G, 5G on your phone. That's all mobile broadband. Then we have, I'm gonna go to DSL now. So DSL is an older technology and it does push internet over copper cables, which is the same as cable internet, but it does so at a much lower speed. So usually the highest speed there is gonna be 25.3. So it's right on the brink of served and unserved. Cable technology, I would say most towns in Maine are run by cable. So this is sort of, you are probably all aware of Spectrum. Spectrum is largely a cable company. So that is sort of what a lot of towns in Maine have right now. And so it's sort of a mix between fiber as a backbone. So the internet gets from, so you get the main internet to the town through a fiber, but then it goes to each home through a copper wire. And that's what the cable is. Then we have fiber. So this is instead of pushing internet through copper cables, this pushes internet through glass fibers. And this allows the internet speed to move a lot quicker. So fiber to the home is probably the fastest speed that you'll see, but it also is very expensive. And when you're dealing with rural areas, in order to connect them to fiber, you have to build fiber all the way out to those areas, which can be very expensive. So again, there's no one size fits all. And that's sort of where fixed wireless and satellite come in. So you might have areas that are so rural that a fixed wireless solution, which is sort of a cell phone tower that beams out internet service to a potential area surrounding it, or a satellite, which is you have satellites orbiting the Earth that provide internet access. So that's sort of Starlink. And fixed wireless, an example would be red zone or outer reach broadband. And so fixed wireless and satellite are potential solutions for really rural areas that maybe don't have the funds right now to afford to sort of lay down fiber all the way out to the homes, but they still are lacking internet access. The one drawback of wireless and satellite is just Maine has a lot of trees and that can block access to internet. And so that is definitely something to think about when you're planning for those, is that you might have some issues with connectivity depending on the blockage with trees. So does anyone have any questions? I know this is a lot of information. And also I'm going to check the time really quick. Okay. I think we're doing good.
I just want to say I love this image because it gives you all the different channels that we move broadband speeds through. And I think, we see all these different words being used in media reports and by experts, and it's rare that you have it all in one place, visually explaining what we're talking about. So I hope folks will use this graphic and keep it because it's a handy one.
Yeah. And this also, I think it was you, George, who said sharing information with towns and communities that may not know as much about broadband. Feel free to use these slides or these images anytime you talk with those towns or meet with select boards to explain things, because I think it is a very useful graphic to use. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the 3 A's of broadband. So this is just a really important thing to keep in mind throughout your planning. So there are sort of 3 aspects of broadband that need to be thought of sort of in tandem throughout the process. So first we have availability. So this is just, is there existing broadband infrastructure? Is there fiber laid down on the ground? Is there cable through poles? Does the infrastructure exist that, that houses, homes can connect to? Then we have affordability. So this is, can residents afford the monthly subscription rate? So this is something that's really important to think about when you're moving towards a project. Will the residents be able to afford the monthly pay? Because if they have the infrastructure, but they can't afford to connect, it's almost as if they don't have the infrastructure at all. And the third aspect of this is accessibility. So this is where digital inclusion measures come in. So this is sort of making sure once the infrastructure is in place and built and available, once everyone can afford that internet, are people able to take advantage of using the internet? Do they sort of understand how they can potentially apply to jobs, or what internet sort of platforms are useful for different different things that they need to do? And also, do people have devices they need to connect? So do people have computers? Do they have sort of routers, that type of thing, to connect to the internet? So all 3 of these are really important, and throughout the process, it can sometimes be easy to focus on one at a time, but it is always really important to remember that you need all 3 of these to fully realize the benefits of broadband in a community and across the state of Maine. Okay, so now I'm going to touch a little bit on ownership models. And this is going to be just sort of a broad overview just to give you a little bit of background on it. There are sort of 4 that I'll talk about right now that are important for the state of Maine. So the first one I'll talk about is where the internet service provider owns the infrastructure and they operate on the infrastructure. So this is sort of how Spectrum works. So they have cable. If they have cable in a town, they own the cable, they operate on the cable, and no one else can use that cable. It belongs to them. And they own and operate it and decide on price, decide when they expand. The internet service provider sort of has control in that situation. So for example, Damariscotta, Maine has expanded Spectrum cable throughout their town. And so that's the solution that they went with. And that's the ownership model. The town did not want to own the infrastructure. The next option is a municipally owned infrastructure, where they contract out an internet service provider to operate it, but the infrastructure is owned by the town. So an example of this is Islesboro, Maine. They took out a revenue bond to pay for the infrastructure. So they, as a town, have ownership over that infrastructure, and they partnered with GWI. And GWI is an internet service provider that operates on that network. So they're in charge of the operation costs and that aspect of maintenance. And then another option is municipalities own and operate the internet infrastructure. So Chattanooga, Tennessee is an example of this. The city owns themselves the infrastructure, and they also act as a utility to operate it for community residents. So that is an option as well. And then lastly, a regional utility. is when a collection of towns work together to own the infrastructure. So they coordinate with each other. They all own the infrastructure as a group. So an example of this in Maine is the Down East Broadband utility. This is Calais, Baileyville, and one other I'm forgetting. But basically those 3 towns, they own the infrastructure. And this is actually an open access network. So any internet service provider in Maine can operate on this network. So you can have multiple internet service providers operating on the same network. And this is important because it creates sort of competition, lowers prices, allows different residents to decide which internet service provider that they want to have providing internet to their homes. So this can be a lot to process at once, but it is sort of interesting to know because in Maine, a lot of municipalities are considering and starting to move towards potentially owning the network. But as you move through the process and work with towns, there will be a point where a town or a community or a region needs to decide if they want to own the infrastructure or not.
And I just want to say, I think that like this is such a historical moment to be aware of, because if you think about how many of our utilities were built out back in the day, often through a public-private partnership, sometimes public, sometimes private, whatever road your community is choosing to go down is going to be the road for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And so once you're on one of these paths, the longer you're on it, sometimes the more difficult it is to jump over to a different one. And so it's really important that you as county connectors just be aware of sort of which model your community has chosen, or how you can play a role in helping choose what model your community goes after. But this is going to be, in 15 or 20 years, we're going to look back and look at how different communities addressed this ownership model question. And I hope that many of us will look back and feel a sense of pride for having chosen either the right one or sort of maneuvered and worked hard to hammer out agreements for one that would work well enough for your communities. But just wanted to say that these ownership models are extremely important in terms of where we're going to end up in the next 30 or 40 years with broadband expansion at the local level.
So it's 11 o'clock, so I know you said this has to end, but I did have a question, but if it has to end, I could put it someplace else.
It looks like Emily extended the meeting time, so we're good to go. If you want to fire away, Jessica, feel free.
Okay, so yesterday I kind of asked a question along this line and Peggy answered it, but I got really confused by the answer. And it was that town of Hampton, voted down whatever plan they had. And Peggy started out by talking about roads and bridges in a community, that roads and bridges in a community are owned by a community, and anybody, rich or poor, you don't pay a different price to go on that road or the bridge. And then, so I understood that. And I kind of thought like, okay, so that's what they're saying about these broadband, the infrastructure for broadband. I think that would mean a town or a county or a state would own it, but anybody could go on it. And then she talked about railroads. Railroads are different. Railroads, I think she said, own the tracks and decide what stop they're going to go at, what fees they want people to pay. So I understood that too. But then the end of it, I got really confused, where she kind of said that, I don't know if she said Hampton or Leeds, one of them decided to own it, and it got, I don't know, maybe you guys could clarify that. I that's where she lost me. So.
Clara, I talked with Peggy about this the other day, and you're right that the answer is large. I think basically what happened was Hampton was considering moving towards this municipally owned and operated model, but they voted that down, just as you said, Jessica. They decided that's not what they want to do. However, Peggy believes, and I agree with her, that this was a win because those internet service providers, the private companies that were basically competing with the town in this instance, decided they would increase their services to compete with that, so that people didn't decide to let Hampton own and operate their own network, because the ISPs wanted to maintain control over the networks in that area. So even though, it ended up not becoming a town-owned system, the ISPs offered to increase their services in order to keep people from voting in that direction. Does that make sense? Feel free to, if it's not, you can fire up, and maybe Clara or Japhet, you can take a stab at it.
Okay, so it's gonna be like your number one. Hampton is gonna be like number one, ISP owned and operated, because the town voted down number two.
Yes. That's my understanding of it.
And so then, so that brings me back to Clara's slide. And Clara, your presentation was really excellent. But when we get to the affordability piece, a lot of us in AARP Maine worked on the financial status of many Mainers, and many Mainers live on like $1,300 a month, just Social Security, and have no retirement savings, and it is like a zillion things that.
Don't go there.
Don't go there. Well, so what's the? So is it like going to be that the state or the government is going to help people subsidize? So I just see affordability as really difficult in a state like Maine unless you have government, and there's such an anti-government feeling out there, so that's kind of, it's a broad question, but.
So I think it's important just to flag. I think there's some, stuff popping up here that's important to flag. One reminder for folks, no matter where you are in the public versus private meeting the broadband need, the private entities have had more than 25 years to fill these needs, to help connect more Mainers. And they have repeatedly said that it's not worth the cost of laying fiber or laying cable to get more Mainers plugged in. So they've had more than enough opportunity. And I think what you're seeing here is towns and communities saying, well, we've had enough of waiting. We're going to start doing this ourselves. And now the ISPs are saying, "Oh, okay, well, wait a minute. If you're going to do it, maybe we can help you out." So it's sort of loosening what's been entrenched and stuck for more than 2 decades, and that's fine. That's the way it should be. I will say we are hearing some rumblings of communities that are saying we're going to go it alone. We're going to develop our own owned and operated internet broadband system. And that's being met with a little bit of tension from the ISPs. And there are some examples of towns and communities that are being heavily lobbied, I'll say, or pressured by ISPs, in an effort to sort of work together. But there is some tension there. And that tension is natural, right? Because like I said, communities feel like the private entities have had plenty of time to figure this out, and they've simply said they're not going to do it. So I think what you're seeing is towns, pushing to allude to what Patty was saying, is that you're pushing a little bit, to get ISPs to do the right thing. But at the end of the day, you're right, Jessica, we do care about the affordability piece. And that's something that county connectors are going to have to be really stressing, because as we know with everything, if it's not affordable, it's not accessible. So at the end of the day, we think that these community conversations about having a community owned and operated ISP is going to drive, some of these internet companies to step up. And that's a good conversation to have, because we have not been having it for over 25 years. So let's recognize that step of progress.
Yeah, thank you, Japhet. Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think affordability is a big issue, and something that needs to be in every conversation and definitely plays into the ownership models. When you think about not only the initial investment of getting the infrastructure, but how much the subscription fee is going to be going forward, and whether or not your residents can pay for that. And that's also why it's really important to, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but engage your communities and sort of ask them questions and survey them to figure out if the solution that you are looking to provide is affordable. And one program that I'll just mention really quick, having to do with affordability, is the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. So this is something, as a county connector, it would be really good for you guys to know about, just as a way to offer it to towns and regions that are dealing with affordability issues. So this is a federal subsidy that individuals can apply for to get a subsidy, a discount off of their monthly subscription rate. So that's something that I can also provide that in the follow-up materials, is information on that and how to apply. Okay, any other questions on ownership models? I know we're running short on time, but I do have a couple more slides. Japheth, are we good to continue, or is everyone okay with that? Okay. All right, so next we're gonna dive into the community-driven broadband model. So this I referenced a bit before, and this graphic can be a little overwhelming. So I want you to sort of look at it as it is a wheel of things that are all really important to do, but they don't necessarily need to happen in any specific order. So you can sort of pick out and start anywhere you want within this wheel. But just to go over the main sections, so engaging the community, it's a really important step that you probably should take in general at some point. And this can be how I've seen it done in the communities I work with is we sent out a survey to all residents asking about internet speeds, internet satisfaction, that type of thing. Also sort of what they use the internet for, so we can figure out if people are working remotely, if people are learning from home. And also, I think it's important to engage different sectors in engaging the community. So you maybe want people from the school district or the healthcare district, or maybe people from the library, someone from the town office. So it's important to engage all aspects of the community in this process. And then assessing infrastructure options. So this is sort of an important step to take. So one aspect of this, which is probably a first step for a lot of communities, is talking with their incumbent service providers. So these are the internet service providers that already exist within their area, already provide internet service. So it's a sort of an important step to talk with them and see what their plans are for the region on expansion. And then also it's sort of figuring out if you want to expand, say you have cable in your town, do you want to expand cable, or are you thinking more of laying down fiber, investing more at the beginning to have infrastructure that will be more future-proof in the sense that it will allow for higher speeds as technology updates and as we require and will need to rely on higher speeds. Funding broadband projects is also an important sort of step or phase in the process. So this obviously addressing affordability, choosing a financial project. So this is sort of where grant funding comes in. So are you going to help pay for the project with a grant from the state? Are you going to partner with an internet service provider that will contribute some of the funding, which has happened? Or are you going to maybe try to take out a revenue bond with the town to pay for it? So there are a lot of different options on how to fund broadband projects. And you don't have to know all of them right now. But as you go, you'll definitely learn that there are different sort of creative ways that towns have been trying to fund projects. And then lastly, realizing the benefits. So this sort of comes back to the 3 A's. So this is sort of the accessibility portion and making sure that once you do have a project set, you have the infrastructure built, and maybe even before that, you're making sure that you're putting in efforts to make sure that residents sort of know the benefits of internet access, know how to use different resources on the internet, have the devices to take advantage of high-speed internet. So this was a model that was created by the Island Institute. And it's just really important to see this visual and have this as a resource, because a lot of towns that you'll probably interact with have seen this or are sort of following the community-driven broadband model and process. And this is something that's talked about a little bit in the broadband boot camp that I mentioned before. And their process definitely follows this model. And this is something that is sort of unique to Maine, is making sure that communities are involved in the process and making sure you understand their needs as you move forward. So does anyone have any questions on this? All right, now we're going to move on to something a little different. We're going to talk about federal funding. So there's a lot of federal funding coming into the state, and it is often very confusing where it's coming from, how much is coming. So I tried to break it down in a way that sort of just gives the numbers. So I'll talk about each section. So first we have the American Rescue Plan Act. So one section of this is local fiscal recovery funds. These are the funds that are going to counties and the funds that are going specifically to towns and cities. So this is $260 million is going to be spread across counties, and $237 million will be spread across towns and cities. So something that is important to know about this specific funding stream is that it is not specifically earmarked for broadband, but broadband is under the rules, it can be used for broadband. So this is sort of where county connectors come in, and why we've started engaging regional levels and county levels is because counties are going to get this huge influx of funding. And if they have broadband as a priority and are prepared in planning and connecting with towns and cities across their county, they will be more ready to use that funding on broadband instead of using it for something else. So that's just an important thing to know about, that this funding does exist, and it can be used for broadband. The Capital Projects Fund, Governor Mills has put $128 million specifically for broadband expansion in the state. So this is also really a very big number, and it's really important to see how this is going to be distributed within the state, but a lot of this funding is going to go to broadband state agencies. And then there will most likely be grant application processes to have access to this funding. So it is really important that towns and communities and counties are ready to act on this funding, and sort of have a plan in place, have assessed the needs of their community, and have figured out maybe what type of solution they want to go for, so that they'll be ready for this funding when it comes in and becomes accessible to them. There's also $21 million within the unallocated ARPA funds, and this is through the Maine Jobs Recovery Program. And this $21 million has also been designated to achieving universally available broadband. And then lastly, the last piece of federal funding is from the newly passed Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which has delegated at least $100 million for broadband. So adding all of this up, that is about $746 million coming from the federal government to the state for broadband funds. And it's going to be really, really key that towns and counties prepare to be ready for when this funding comes to the state, so that it can be used for broadband, because this is sort of a once in a generation opportunity for funding, and opportunity to expand and get Maine up to speed, and get towns and counties connected to work towards universal broadband. So I'm going to pause for questions. And again, this slide will be shared with you so you can look at this breakdown and be able to have this as a resource to track the funding. But does anyone have any questions on that?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in the going back to the local fiscal recovery funds, where it is spread over counties, other part over towns and cities, there's a lot of competing interests there. but
Yes.
a number of those interests kind of overlap. You know, if people want to spend on schools and they
Yeah.
want the technology improved in the schools, or children's, access improved, or hospitals, but want to, so, because I myself have a lot of areas that I want money to be spent. I just don't want it on broadband. There's a lot of issues out there that need money. So I was just kind of, I don't know what my question is. But do you kind of see that needs will overlap, and that we just won't be going in advocating for,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Just,
Can
yeah, Jeff.
I just real quick, I think that Jessica, you bring up a good point. I don't think our goal is to have county connectors like yourself be advocating that every last dollar that comes through the local fiscal recovery funds to the counties or to towns, that all be used for broadband infrastructure. I think the argument is, do we know how much those towns or counties are thinking they would use for broadband infrastructure? Because the bottom line is, the majority of communities in Maine do not have the infrastructure that they need to support many of the overlapping issues you raise. So, it's fine for your hospital to have telehealth functionality, but if only 15% of the surrounding patients in the communities that depend on that hospital for healthcare have access to broadband, it
Right.
doesn't do much good, right? So you're right to flag that, but I think it's a good argument to say,
Yeah,
to engage your local community and say, are we
yeah,
meeting that need? Are we building an infrastructure that will support
yeah,
all these overlapping issues, not just for tomorrow, but for the coming decade?
yeah. So to build our talking points, incorporating broadband into all those other things, police and schools okay, thank you.
Which is what
Yep.
Susan Crawford was telling us, is
Uh.
you need to have a multi-system approach to that, because
Yeah.
it is threaded throughout everything.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
spoke really fast. She made a lot of good points, but I was.
You need to read her book.
Oh, thank you,
I have
Scott.
a question.
Mhm.
One of the things that concerns me the most, we're talking about looking towards the future, but if you go back to, say, the 80s, and internet was at its birthing, and we did not keep up with the technology, and I'm concerned that we're not looking at the technology piece, because the cable and satellite, they're not looking at that piece. So when the latest iPhone comes out or new gadget, we may be sinking all this money into what's current technology, and then by the time we're finished laying all the line, and someone is going to turn around and go, hey, you guys, we can't use our iPhones anymore. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
So are we connecting with those people who are creating the newest and greatest technology for us?
Yeah, so I think that's a really important point, and sort of a threading discussion that has sort of gone through towns for the past year or so, is this idea that fiber is probably the most future-proof technology that we can have.
Okay.
And it already has the capacity to support speeds far beyond what we need today. However, I think the issue that towns are facing is the price tag of fiber infrastructure.
Right, but if you're building a piece, when the university built their new science building, they
Mhm.
knew they were going to outgrow that. So they added an additional floor and it was empty. Well, they added 2 additional floors and they were empty and they were
So
able to move into it, but the building was there.
yeah, so that's actually so something that I know a few towns have done or have been thinking about doing, and I think other towns are thinking similarly, is taking the funding that they have now, and I think Susan Crawford talked about this a little bit, but taking the funding that they have available now and building out fiber in their town, with the idea that it's potentially a hybrid model for now with the funding that they have, sort of some hybrid of fiber and fixed wireless, or other technology, but knowing that they have a plan or looking forward to plan for slowly expanding that fiber to the rest of the town. So I
And
think
are
that,
you finding that communities are engaging in that type of conversation?
yeah, I think so. I
Okay.
think a lot of towns are moving from just expanding what they have, to thinking ahead to building something that is more future proof. And I think that's the towns that I've worked with, at least, and the sentiment that I've heard is that this is sort of a big moment for change. And like you said, technology is rapidly advancing, and soon certain technologies will like potentially become obsolete. So I think you make a really good point, and I do think that is a sentiment that a lot of towns are moving towards. But that doesn't mean, I mean, the towns that you guys might be working with, you may come upon a committee or a select board that isn't thinking that way. So figuring out how to sort of make that argument known without, there won't be a perfect solution for every town or the same solution for every
Right.
town. Sort of understanding that when you talk with these communities is really important. But I think bringing up those points of is the technology future proof? That's something that questions that committees and communities need to be asking themselves. And so I do think that that is a really important thing to bring up. Of
Thank you.
course, yeah. Hope that answered your question.
Yes.
All right, any other questions? Just have one more slide after this. All right, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about state broadband funding. So a lot of the money that is coming into the state from the federal government is going to be distributed through these 3 organizations. So the first organization I'll talk about is Connect Maine Authority. So this is a state broadband agency that has been around in Maine for a while now. They have 2 options of funding sources: planning grants and infrastructure grants. So planning grants, towns can apply to these when they're first starting the broadband process. So this could help pay for example, if a town wanted to survey their residents to figure out what community needs are, but they needed money for the direct mailing and for the efforts that entails, or to hire someone as a community engagement consultant, that's sort of what planning grant funds would be used for. Or if they wanted to look into existing infrastructure in their town and wanted to maybe hire a consultant to do that, or contract someone else, that's what planning grant funds would be used for. The second one is infrastructure grants. So this is applied for after a town has identified a solution, either is partnering with an internet service provider or owning their own network. And so they would apply for an infrastructure grant to actually help cover the cost of building that infrastructure. So those are sort of 2 big grant opportunities within the state of Maine. The Maine Community Foundation is another organization that helps fund broadband within the state. And they have a program of community broadband grants. So this again sort of just helps with any aspect of broadband planning. So I worked with Harrison and Naples, 2 towns in Cumberland County, and they both were able to receive Maine Community Foundation grants. And this largely helped us towards the beginning of our process. We used that funding for direct mailing. We used it to buy different ways to engage the community. We did banners, signs in different areas. So this is also a really important funding tool, and something that a lot of towns in Maine have been able to benefit from. And some towns you work with might already have funding from Maine Community Foundation. And then the last one I'll touch upon is the Maine Connectivity Authority. So this is the new broadband state agency. And we heard from Tim Schneider yesterday about it a little bit. And if you weren't able to make that, the recording again will be available on the Maine Broadband Coalition website. But a lot of the funding that's coming into the state is going to be redistributed through the Maine Connectivity Authority. And it is a newly formed entity, and they're still sort of doing strategic planning on what their funding mechanism is going to look like. But going forward as a county connector, this is just a really important organization to have on your radar, to try to keep up with. They have monthly meetings, and they have a website. Again, websites for all of these organizations will be included in follow-up materials, but they have a website that includes recordings of all their meetings so far. And then Connect Maine also has regular monthly meetings where they sort of discuss funding opportunities. This is where they'll usually talk about opening windows for applications. So figuring out when a planning grant window will open, when an infrastructure grant window will open and close. One more important thing to note about Connect Maine is that the windows tend to be fairly small for the actual application. So something to just keep in mind when working with towns is a lot of the planning and creation of the grant occurs before that window opens. So it's important to sort of keep note on that and keep note on the planning and when it looks like those windows are going to be open so that you're prepared to apply when they do. Does anyone have any questions on these organizations?
Well, how do you talk about something that you don't know what the opportunity is yet?
So they have sort of, they will tell you when the window will be, and so, but I'm just saying a lot of the planning will happen before that window opens. And they also on their website have past examples of grant applications, different grant forms that you can look at and learn from to figure out sort of what is needed to apply. But the windows themselves, it tends to help if the community is ready beforehand and already following that process. It's just something that I've experienced with towns in the past year.
Mm.
Okay, and that is going to be it for this presentation. I know we covered a lot of information. All these slides will be shared. This presentation will be available on the website. But does anyone have any last questions before we wrap up on everything that we talked about today?
Well, I haven't. So I think I'm in a pretty sophisticated, I mean, I assume that my town council already has a committee, already has people way smarter than me working on this. Cape Elizabeth, it's a wealthy community, you know, people need broadband, they've been using it, blah, blah, blah. So obviously my role here is a lot different. Like, what do they need me for? Versus there's like a zillion towns, it seems that like nothing, there's nobody, there's no one knows. And so are we going to be deployed to other places, or do I still have a role in a, you know, a wealthier, more wired community, etc.? That's, I guess, a question.
Good question. And I think that, you know, we're definitely aware that there are many communities in radically different places when it comes to broadband planning, conversations, development, all that good stuff. I would say, Jessica, don't assume, like I think you used the word assume, so I'd caution you about that. I would say you should definitely feel free to insert yourself to, you know, learn more about what's happening. I would hope that the broadband committee, if that's what they have at Cape Elizabeth, have recorded meetings, have notes, have some sort of easy access for you to see how they're talking about broadband, so you can start to investigate it. I will say often in wealthier communities, the affordability question is often sort of not a question. So anybody who lives in Cape Elizabeth who might not be wealthy is sort of forgotten about. or at least their concerns about price points and access are not a priority. I'm not saying that that's what's happening, but I can just tell you from working in wealthier communities, often it's, the challenge of the cost is not as much of a priority because people are able to afford, the access point. But I would just say, feel free to start investigating. And, I think the way you do it can be very supportive and just, being a curious person. They shouldn't have any problem with that. At the end of the day, I would hope most communities would want some sort of support and interest. Not that you're a watchdog, but more that you're, trying to help learn more so that you can inform your friends and neighbors who might not be following the broadband committee's conversations.
Okay.
It's also
Yeah.
a great way to make those connections, Jessica, that you were talking about, to make sure when they're building a new school that they're thinking about the broadband aspect of it.
Absolutely. And I'll add just a couple of quick thoughts, right? Karem in the meeting earlier today talked about donuts within communities, where you have service in a ring, but there's holes in the middle. And those holes can be, one of many different systems, right? We talked about the 3 A's of broadband. That's affordability, accessibility, and availability, and it could be any one of those that causes an issue. If you might have gigabit fiber access, but if it's over $100 a month, there's people in your community that can't afford that. And so you need to make sure that you're keeping those things in mind. And then I'll also add, and Tim Schneider talked about this on the first day, even if your community is doing everything right and you are getting broadband brought to your area at an affordable and accessible and adequate rate, you need to think about what comes next, right? How do we take advantage of that Wi-Fi once it's brought into the area? How do we make the most of it and translate it into real economic benefits for our community? And that is a part of, utilizing those events that we talked about earlier in the slide. As a county connector, you might be, encouraging people to attend digital literacy educational trainings, or, take advantage of the new services that become available, like free, library Wi-Fi hotspots, or new internet services for, healthcare provision and things like that. So there's stuff to do all across the state. Don't worry about it. You will have more than enough. And if you do want to get on the forums and provide some of the guidance about what's worked in your area to other people that don't have the same kind of, excellent motivation and movement in their town, more power to you. That's a fantastic aspect of the collaboration and teamwork of county connectors. So those are a couple of points I'll add to that.
That was great, Sam. Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions?
Well, it might be a good time just to highlight some next steps.
All right, so Sam went over these a little bit before, but we just wanted to post them as a reminder. So a recording of this session will be on the Maine Broadband Coalition website by next week. We'll send you guys all a link to where you can find that. The next training, the next County Connector training, will be December 9th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And we will also get that registration link out to you guys. But if any of you have conflict for that time, that will also be recorded and made available to you all. Again, a great first step is to attend the Island Institute Let's Talk Broadband. The next session is December 3rd at 11 a.m. It's just a really great way to connect with other people working on broadband in the state. And then for what you can do, get towns to sign onto the guiding values document. So this is something that we will share with you all in the upcoming week. And there will be a new page on the Maine Broadband Coalition website added for towns to sign up. And then we will be keeping track of who signs on to those guiding values for the state to see which towns are prioritizing broadband. Join the MBC forum is the second to do. And also I will be sharing the user guide again, but please feel free to email me if you have any questions on how to use that. I'm actually going to share my email in the chat right now, so you all have that But it can be a little tricky to use at first. So if anyone has any questions or needs any guidance on that, feel free to email me. And then lastly, we are wanting you to take the first steps to connecting with existing broadband leaders in your county. So Sam will be providing you all with a sample email that you can use, or feel free to tailor it however you see fit. And I will also be providing you with a spreadsheet that lists existing broadband leaders in each county. And it's not exhaustive. There will be other broadband leaders that are not on that list, but it's a great way to get started and set up a meeting with those leaders and see sort of what they've been involved with in the county. And they might have recommendations for others for you to reach out to. But I will be sharing that information with you all, and it'll include names and emails and organizations. Does anyone have any questions on the next steps or any final comments before we wrap up? I really appreciate all the questions we've got. It helps us to hear sort of what you guys are thinking and how you're processing this information. So I really appreciate it.
100%. And Clara, thank you so much for sticking around. You know, I'm here dedicated specifically to the County Connector program in this, but Clara is also managing the behind the scenes of the entire summit. And yet she's here with you guys giving this presentation. So just Clara, a million times over, thank you so much for sticking around and doing such an excellent job providing some clarity into those really confusing topics. It can be a lot, but you really broke it down nicely. So it's fantastic. But yes, also feel free to ask more questions. We love hearing from you. Just echoing what Clara said, it's really important to hear what you guys have, you know, going around in your heads as well. It's a community and team effort for sure.
Okay.
All right. With that, I think we're ready to wrap it up and say thank you. We hope you'll reach out. We'll definitely be in touch. As you know, as you can probably see from the next steps, we're going to owe you some things. So some documents and some resources will be coming your way. And we hope that you will at least take the first step and get yourself into the forum. If you have any questions, let Clara, myself, or Sam know. We're happy to help you troubleshoot that. But let's start the conversation and see where we can go all across Maine when it comes to broadband expansion. Thanks,
Thanks
everybody.
so much, everybody.
So much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care.